and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time. Okay, guys, so let's talk a little bit about this whole hybrid thing with the home and school partnership, and just talk about a little bit about how that works. And I think I hit on this a bit in the building culture and the admissions, because there's overlap with all of this. This is where you see that play out, is in your admissions policies and procedures, in your expectations, in how you're building culture. Let's just talk not specifically about the culture and that, but just about that hybrid partnership, okay? Which hits on several of those different areas, right? So this hybrid model is unique in the sense that it's more of a partnership from the school, is providing more than in a co-op. And co-ops have been around for decades, homeschool co-ops since the 80s or something. And funny story, my son asked me how long ago the 70s were the other day, and I had to tell him it was just a few years before mom was born. So he had some concept of how long ago. Then it was the 20, 30, 40 years probably cooperatives have been around, homeschool cooperatives. Those can be very robust and people can rely on them, but they're not as robust as a drop-off hybrid program of 2 or 3 days, okay? So it's more of that part-time school model where the parents are usually relying more heavily for more instruction, more guidance from the hybrid school. So that's just like kind of the paradigm shift of what the school, I'm going to call it a school, but what the program is providing to the family. And from day one, you have to make sure that you as like a founder, as a director, or whatever, are thinking through how you want that to be presented so that the expectations and how the families are being informed of what your program does is accurate and consistent, okay? Which doesn't mean that you can't feel it out a bit in your first couple years, see what works and what doesn't work to some extent, but you do want to have a vision for this is who we are, this is what we offer, this is what we need parents to do to partner well with us. If you can stay pretty solid on that, I think it's more of a confidence thing. Like, it's okay to build a program that requires a certain kind of partnership from families and not try to accommodate everyone. If you're coming from a school background, you're probably going to lean more into the school being stronger in that relationship because that's just what you're used to. If you're coming from a homeschool background, you might be leaning more into the school being more hands-off and the family being stronger in that relationship. I don't know if strong is the right word, but like more authoritative, having more of like a leadership, sort of like, well, this is what we want and this is how we're going to do it. That kind of attitude. So depending on what your background is and what most of your families are coming from, you might be having to sort out the expectations based and have to kind of like face some preconceived notions of how it works, okay? And it also depends on like, you might have one idea in your head and then 80% of the families who come to your door who want the program have a different idea, and you're going to have to decide, well, no, this is what I'm doing, and they're just going to have to go along with what I'm doing, which is probably fine unless you're in that very beginning part and you're doing your market research and you're getting to talking to families and what you want to do isn't what they want by a long shot, because then you might just lose them and then your market isn't even there, okay? So that's part of the listening process in the early part of like market validation, is listening and making sure that what your vision is matching up with what your market wants, and then walking the line between staying strong and sound in what you want to offer and what your vision is, and also making sure that it's actually what people want. Okay. The same thing goes for like setting your tuition and all of that. You've got what's going to actually cover your costs and make sure everybody gets paid. And then there's what people can actually pay. And you have to find the sweet spot in between. Okay. So, anyway, what I want to encourage you in is it's okay to say, this is how we do it. This is the program we're building, and not try to like make everybody happy. Okay. And it's also okay to say, this is the curriculum we're using. If you sign up for this class or this program, the whole program, depending on how you're doing it, or these classes, this is how we're doing it. You either have to do homework at home or you don't, or you have to follow along with this curriculum on pace and get the work done at home. Okay. Just because they're homeschoolers doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want at home necessarily. So that's where it gets down to into like the expectations. So you get some people who have been homeschooling for a long time. They know what they like, they know what they want, and they might come in and be like, I like this idea, I want to drop my kids off, but we like the math curriculum that we're using, okay? And it's not the one you're using, right? You have to make a decision whether that's going to be like, well, that's fine, as long as you understand that this is what we're teaching, this is how we do it, and you can do what you want at home, but we need the child to be able to participate. Or maybe you let them sit out and do a study hall if they're an older child. Or you can say, we really need people to do the same curriculum we're doing so that the work is done and everyone is moving along at the same pace, right? You need to just make that decision early on. And like I said, you might have to feel it out a little bit in the first year or two to see what works. That's just kind of, how it goes. But if you set that expectation from the beginning that people are going to do what works for the program, and that's just what they have to do, and they have to understand that from the beginning, then that can just help prevent a lot of like frustration later on, okay? Especially with the skill-based subjects like phonics and math, if you're going to cover those things, it's particularly helpful if you just say, well, this is the curriculum we're using, this is the pace we're covering it at, we're going to cover this level for this grade or whatever, and we're going to be doing this stuff at school, and we need you to do those things at home. It generally delivers a higher quality to the kids, and you just have to set that expectation from the beginning, okay? So you can put things in your handbook, your admissions process, as you're going through the process of like people just acquiring, or whether you're starting with like your first informational part, your very first year, or once you've got a little momentum and you have people coming in or giving you calls and sending you emails saying, I want to learn more about your program, you're presenting it to them like, well, we assign work for math and reading in the early years, and we also assign readings for history and science. Whatever it is that you decide to do, you make sure that you tell them that so that they can decide whether this is a good fit for them, okay? That's making sure you get the right people into the school, or at least increasing the chances that the people who are coming are people who want to cooperate in the model, okay? Having some admissions expectations about attendance, again, as homeschoolers, and if you're not a legal school, you don't have to keep attendance. Homeschoolers sometimes just want to have their own schedule and do their own thing. I would say have some grace with that, because it's some of the benefits of homeschooling, right? If people go on vacation after everybody else goes back to school in September and they're gone for a week or whatever, that's probably fine. Make your own decisions on that. But if you have people who are leaving for 1 week every single month, or 6 weeks they're gone because that's just what they do, it might not be the best fit. So you might want to have some minimal attendance requirements or like consecutive attendance requirements just from the beginning in your admissions policies, to make sure that you're weeding out the people who are like, oh, we come when we feel like it, and we don't come if we don't feel like it, which I would say is not the majority of people, but you do get them occasionally, okay? All right. So again, some of those admissions expectations about curriculum, about what you do at home, about attendance, behavioral things too, code of conduct, all of that kind of thing you want to make sure that you have in your admissions, okay? So that a lot of this translates into the admissions process and how you relate that to the families as they're coming in. Your teachers also, in that process, in my experience, when you're hiring teachers who come from a full-time school background, especially a public school background, sometimes it's hard for them to wrap their heads around the fact that they're not 100% responsible for getting the kids through the grade, and which they can't do in 2 or 3 days. They don't have to do that. They have to be willing to partner with the parent and say, okay, we're trusting the parent to do their end of the deal here. We're trusting the parent to do the other half of the instruction or whatever, 2/3 of the instruction. We don't have to make sure that the kid understands all of this and passes the grade and learns all of the things. We can only do what we do at school. We can only teach what we teach, okay? But also balancing that with, but we do teach what we teach, and we do need people to do the assignments. That's okay to expect, okay? So you can see, I think, that there's this balance in the expectations of you as a school and how you explain that and relate that to the parents. And then you just kind of set that culture of like, yes, we come every week, we have our work done, and we signed up because we knew what we were getting into, right? We wanted this because of the support. Now, having said all of that, I think I said this in a previous episode, I don't remember, but it can also be helpful if you don't set the expectations super, super high. And I don't mean that in like a quality standpoint, but as far as like the expectations for how everyone performs. A lot of this has to do with your philosophy. If you're a classical school or a Sean Mason school or a Waldorf school or a project-based school, this is going to look so different, okay? But as a hybrid program, you're only providing part-time, okay? So a lot of hybrid programs, I think, will say, well, this is what we do at school, and you have to do this work for all the subjects in between. You got homework for your home days, and you have to come back having done that work, which is fine, except that there's so much of what you do at school that's reliant on everybody doing all the things at home that sometimes it can cause some frustration. Now, if this sounds like I'm disagreeing with what I just said, what I'm doing is saying you set the expectation, but you also keep the expectation realistic, okay? So at minimum, you want those skill-based subjects probably to be assigned for home. But if you don't have to have work done at home in between to make your school day successful, and you could still deliver a really high quality curriculum without that, and you kind of keep them independent, home and school, that can just reduce the number of places where you can have tension, okay? So let's say that for history and literature, you have books that you're reading, okay? If you read the books at school, but you just read a book at school, right? And then at home, the parents are maybe reading a different book in the same, genre or the same time period or something. How quickly they move through that book doesn't affect what you do at school. You can do that quite effectively, and it just reduces the number of places where you can have that conflict. For skill-based subjects, what can end up happening is the opposite problem is if you don't have the expectation that they do the work at home, you're trying to move forward on a skill at school, your teacher is, and the kids aren't building the skill at home at the same pace, and that becomes frustrating at school. So if you have that expectation that for the skill-based subjects, yes, you have to be working cohesively between the home and school with the same curriculum, progressing pretty much at the same school-ish sort of average rate, which is, yes, it's something you have to give a bit. The homeschoolers don't always love. It causes the least amount of frustration for the school, okay? But it also causes a lot less frustration for the school if you take the ones where that isn't as important as far as like the skill, and you separate home and school. So you just read the books, the history and the literature, maybe the science and art and all of that stuff. You don't make it dependent on what they do at home. You just give strong recommendations for home or a book list for home or whatever, or you let parents choose and you let that run separately. It just reduces the number of potential conflicts. A lot of parents, in my experience, and even as a parent, what you do at home, often you focus on making sure your kids can read, you make sure they can do their math, and they might get to that part and not always get to all of the other stuff. And they rely on the school for that. But whatever you do, you want to make sure that you set the expectations as clearly as you can, okay? And this gets into I talked about this in admissions, it gets a little bit into, it should make you think about admitting as far as like performance at a particular level for the classes. So if a student needs to be able to read and write at a certain level to join a particular class, then you need to make that part of your admissions process so that you don't find out a couple months in that the kid is either bored or they're like lost because they weren't at the level that they needed to be in to join the class. That becomes kind of an assessment issue during your admissions process to make sure the child is placed correctly, in addition to the expectations being clearly communicated about what's expected at home and what's expected at school. Okay? Now, don't forget that if you are a legal school, you are responsible for what they do at home, and you should be assigning the work, okay? But I'm assuming that most of you are not. You're a homeschool supplement, in which case you're not legally responsible for what they do at home. You're not legally responsible for them getting their 180 days or whatever. They're responsible for that, okay? And they're just treating you as one of the ways that they do that, okay? So those are just some partnership things. Just to hit a little bit more on that culture thing, if you have like field trips, pick up and drop off where there's some interaction, any kind of like relational building where people can just strike up a conversation casually, that helps with just building a culture that's friendly, where people know each other, where people can support each other. It also helps if you can have some more formal events. Don't worry about this in your first year or two. If you don't have the bandwidth for it, it's okay. But even if it's just like a kickoff picnic at the beginning of the year in the summer, or a little class Christmas party, or something small, something helps. Or you do some sort of like parent seminar or something like that once or twice a year, where maybe you have someone come in and speak, or you give a little talk, or you just do like a pampering day for moms or something like that once or twice a year. Or a training day on homeschooling, or you have an experienced homeschool mom come in and talk about how they manage their day with their multiple age kids or something like that. That kind of thing also helps build that relationship, because having that sense of belonging for families and moms and dads and whole families and kids, having that sense of like support and belonging helps people stay committed to what they're doing and also want to cooperate, right? It helps them feel like, okay, I want to be part of this community. I want to do things with these people. I want to do life with these people. I want my kids to belong to this. And yeah, I might have to give up a couple little decisions that I make, but it's well worth it because I'm part of this community. I'm supported, and we can all help each other out with this, okay? So that also really helps, just having that fun sort of environment, that supportive sort of environment. And you want to do that with your staff too, but that gets into the culture stuff. But also having parents support the staff and the staff support the parents, right? And kind of having some interaction, encouragement in that way. Those are just little things that you can build into your year, into your calendar, at least look forward into doing, maybe get a volunteer to help organize some of it. That all just helps build that culture and the expectations and the sense of belonging, where what you're doing at home, you're not just a lone mom on an island, homeschooling your kids. And you're also not just passing your kids off to a school where they're doing stuff and you have no idea what they're doing, right? Is this partnership. And so it's kind of an emotional, psychological, as well as like a logistical communication thing to build that environment of belonging and partnership with your families and your school. Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.